Hi there, everybody. I am Matt with K15T, and today we will be discussing 5 really important things you need to keep in mind when creating a strategy for creating documentation in Confluence. We're talking about this because at K15T, we are kind of experts at this, and it is very cool to be starting this conversation with you. I say this because there is so much for your team to consider. And we're just going to start that process. Hey, Ada, good to see you in the chat. Nice to have you there. By the way, this is live, so jump in the live chat because I would love to know your thoughts, your questions, your commentary, your criticisms even, because those will help us as we are moving through this conversation. We want this to be something that you are part of. So if you have thoughts or questions or whatever, please throw them in there. This will be a conversation to get your thoughts going. And that's why we want to have your thoughts in there. I will be all over the chat. If you have a specific question, if you could do something like hashtag question, that would be helpful. And then write your question just so that pops out, but I'll be trying to watch it like a hawk. Finally, if you would hit that like button, maybe even the subscribe button, that is great because it tells the algorithms things the algorithms need to know. Now, I mentioned this is a conversation, which is awesome. Oh, hey, Shannon. Hey, Andy. I mentioned it's a conversation because I'm not going to be just talking to myself. That would be, well, it could be fun actually, but we're not doing that today. Today, I am joined by Chris on my team, who is a documentation expert. Hey, Chris, nice to have you on the live stream.
Thank you for having me.
Chris, this is not your first time being on a K15T like event. And in fact, you've been on some of our live stuff before you worked at K15T. Am I right?
I was a honorary guest on one. And I think in September we had another chat about documentation, obviously, and documentation tools. So yeah. This is maybe a second or third time.
All right. Well, I think, let's see, if this is the third time, you still get the honorary guest status, but after this, you're just a regular guest. And, just to inform you, that changes a lot. You get less of a red carpet treatment in the future. Hello, friends from Buenos Aires. I hope things are warmer where you are than where things where I am. I had to wear my fun light therapy glasses earlier today because there's no sunshine here. I don't know if y'all have seen these things before. Now I'm going to show you. Look at this. You put these on and it beams fake sunlight into your eyes. So that's the state of things where I am. So hope things are nice and cozy there. But we're not here to talk about seasonal depression, because one thing that never depresses anyone is talking about Confluence and documentation. And Chris, the big question for me, and I think a good one to kick this off with, is if I'm working on a team and we're already using Confluence for other things, right? Why wouldn't we just say, okay, we're doing everything else in Confluence and we're kind of like collaborating and stuff in there. Why wouldn't we just write the documentation that way too? Why wouldn't we just just kind of haphazard jump in, just start making pages and writing stuff down?
Well, if you have a Confluence site in your organization or company, you already have what is really capable platform for writing documentation. So that's kind of a given that you don't want to invest additional resources, whether financial or technical, into getting another tool. But you shouldn't just jump into writing, because documentation sort of needs to live in your company's infrastructure as a tool, as a knowledge base in a way. So it needs to integrate into whatever you're doing in terms of processes, your knowledge infrastructure, your tooling, and that requires some thinking through of what you actually want to do, what do you want to achieve, what do you want documentation to be, and what processes should you deploy.
I think this is really interesting because you and I both have worked as technical communicators, so we have like written documentation. And if anybody here, here right now, has been in that space, by the way, hi Sarah, thanks for joining. There is this vibe where people are like, if you are serious about your team's documentation, yes, it would be cool if you used a tool that was integrated with what everybody else is doing. And it would be cool if it integrated really well into your processes. But you actually need to use these very industry-specific tools that are built for like really high-powered use cases. Like think about documenting a hardware product with 30,000 components in it. You should be using that for your team that's documenting a software product. Otherwise, 5 years down the road, you're going to kick yourself because you used Confluence instead. Have you run into that vibe? And can you actually, like, just to clear things up for everybody on here, can people actually just use Confluence for documentation? Like, because I've heard it from a lot of people, like, no, you can't. If you're serious about it, if you want to grow, if this and that and the other thing, no, you can't actually do that.
I like to use tools that are right for the job. And I'm not saying that Confluence is an answer for everything, but it does a lot of things really, really well. As an editor is perfect. Lots of tools that you don't have to write a Python code to actually get it. You take it in, it works right out of the box. But Confluence is not loved in the community as a tech writing tool. That's true. Just a couple of minutes ago on the Writer Docs, somebody was complaining about. The problem with Wiki is that everybody can contribute, which is true. On the other hand,
sure.
If everybody can contribute, it's not a question of the tool. It's a question of governance, like how you approach permissions and who can actually contribute and when. So again, not a tool problem, a governance problem, or maybe a strategy problem. To go back to the strategic thinking, because you don't have a process for the life cycle, for contributing to documentation, for maintaining it, for reviewing it. If it's a free lunch for everybody, then again, not a tool problem. And when it comes to tooling, like you can isolate writers into a tool basically that only 5 people in a company can access, because that's how many writers you have. So why would you have more seats? The problem is once you isolate writers through a tool and only connect them remotely to everything else, either processes or other tooling, then a writer would feel like a castaway on an island, and you're just trying to wave at ships that pass by, not to rescue you, just to have somebody to talk to, really.
Yes. Yes.
No, seriously, like every writer or documentation manager or information architect would attest that documentation is often an afterthought for many companies. And if you're running towards that by isolating yourself into having a standalone tool for 5 people in a company, you're not helping the situation.
I think it's so true about the isolation factor. Because, and it goes so far beyond just like, I think there's an older way of thinking where a lot of people are used to like, oh, well, we have this role on the team and this role on the team and this role on the team. But what you end up with, especially with documentation, if you have writers working in their own process or project management tool or work management tool and in their own writing tool, you end up with like documentation sometimes that feels very disconnected from what the product actually is, and even like disconnected from like how is the marketing team talking about this, because they're having different conversations with maybe the product manager or something like that. There are so many considerations to make, and I wanted to show We have just, within the last month, published a massive guide for your team. So just so you know, if you're taking furious notes from what Chris and I are talking about, we are talking about just 5 things you should consider when it comes to writing documentation in Confluence. This guide is really, really massive, and we've broken it down into 5 phases that you can fully explore. We wanted to cover just like the 5 most important things, or at least the things we felt were most important here. Chris, who is this guide really for?
Oh, as we hinted already, it's for anybody who deals with documentation or is in charge of documentation. And again, it can be a solo tech writer in a startup, an enlightened startup that actually thinks about having a documentation. There are startups like that. And pretty much everybody else until the level of information architect, because again, it's very often that documentation is neglected in a company, and you can just be in a situation that, okay, I just joined this company and they don't have anything. Where do I start? Or you are in a situation when, as I was in the past, that there are documents, there are even documentation sites, but through acquisitions, internal reorganizations, these sort of things, it's scattered. So there's no single source of truth, and your job would be to unify everything into one single body of knowledge that is properly produced, properly maintained, and properly published. And the collateral goal would be to make sure that everybody from the team, and not just writers, but everybody who sort of contributes to documentation in one way or another, is or can be on the same page at every single moment during the entire life cycle.
Yeah.
And that sort of is a first step towards integrating your documentation as a concept into how your company works.
Yeah. Yeah. And for reference, Chris, just so you know, 100% of our audience right now currently write documentation for their teams. So that's I guess we're not necessarily preaching to the choir, but y'all, time to invite more people to the choir, because this guide is written for everybody. The biggest goal here with this guide is to not prescribe to you exactly what you should do, because it's unique for every team. Instead, we want to give you the questions and the things you should consider when you're looking like long-term strategically. How do you build up a healthy life cycle that works for your team? And I wanted to move to kind of the first topic we wanted to talk about, Chris, which is why do we need why strategy? Why can't we just like go to, I don't know, some documentation site and just like copy their life cycle and just jump into that?
Because every company is different, and whatever you do is determined or influenced by what comes in and what needs to come out, and and the way how you approach this internally is kind of important. And there are so many factors that influence what you actually do, how your processes would look like, that it just pays off to ask the most annoying questions about the most annoying details. And the thing that will eventually happen is that as you progress through questions or topics that you might never consider or consider important, like you will start the picture emerging, like what sort of direction you need to go, what sort of tooling you need to have, what sort of processes are better for you. There are things like I don't know, the size and the composition of the wider team that contributes to documentation, not just writers. Do you have who are the subject matter experts? How much you can rely on them? What's the nature of your product? What is your release cycle? Is it continuous delivery, or do you release once a month? And again, this changes dynamic into how you approach writing, reviews, how much time you have for work on documentation that doesn't necessarily depend on development. You just want to improve things. And again, things like compliance. Are you working in a regulated industry where you need to have really precisely defined process of who can do what, and at any given moment you need to have digital signatures for approval. And again, this is something that will impact your strategy and how you approach documentation within the infrastructure of the company, because the ultimate goal is to manage documentation within your company's infrastructure.
I think I loved your point about ask the annoying questions, because that's almost exclusively in every job role I've held. That has been, I think, my greatest strength. And actually, one time my director of product at my last company, he told me that he found me so annoying. This is when I was taking him out to dinner, by the way. And he said this part of me annoyed him so much. And then he was like, begrudgingly, he was like, but it really does help the team explore things that we're not really considering. And I think when it comes to creating a documentation lifecycle that works, if you don't ask the annoying questions now, and you get a year down the road, 2 years down the road, that's the significant problem. That's where like something like, what's our strategy around like, I don't know, how we add screenshots and how we optimize screenshot files for the web. If we don't think about that now, then in a year when we're not appearing well enough on search results because our images are bloated, going through and optimizing a collection of 300 images across your documentation is the worst. So like you need to ask the annoying questions now, I think, because it's going to come back to bite you later. So ask it now if and again, that's what this guide is all about. It's about building a life cycle that can actually live, that can actually survive. Chris, we got a question. How do you deal with stakeholders and subject matter experts if you are the one writing, but not the one who like knows the topics, which also might be difficult when thinking about a strategy like this?
Okay. So I came, my first technical writing job was writing documentation for Skype, and I knew it back and forth. And then I began writing for, at that time, CA-Mix, now Broadcom Mix, which is a mainframe software product. And it's so complex that you can really count in low thousands when it comes to how many people can actually use it in the world. So there was no way I could get proficient in a technology or in a software product that is still being developed and that started in the late 70s. So we developed strategies that basically a developer is a subject matter expert. And for whatever they do, they need to have a draft for themselves. So they would supply the draft to me, and I would manage. I was more of a documentation curator than a writer. I would still make sure that the documentation is readable, that it complies to standards that we had. But I relied on subject matter expertise of the developer, and it worked. Somebody always has knowledge, and for them to try to teach me all those decades of knowledge they had, even for a small part or small update, it would be waste of time. So I over time I developed the rudimentary knowledge of what the product does or what the component does. I obviously got a briefing, but it wasn't like, okay, log on to the terminal and write documentation about that. That just wasn't possible. Not to mention the fact that you can be in a situation that you, as a writer, that you need to document something that you don't have access to for security reasons. And again, common case on mainframe and distributed software, that you need to rely on these people. And again, if they can contribute, if they can access directly your writing tool, or you can access wherever they have their notes, so Confluence and Jira, for example, your job becomes so much easier, not just for accessing information, but for them to review information, because whatever you wrote. So essentially, the writing process becomes really iterative. You write something, they check it, they give you more details, they give you maybe more explanation, notes, and that's how you build the final product. So it becomes really iterative, but you need to rely on it, and you need to have some sort of a framework behind that. So it's you're not sharing Word files or Google Doc files just for somebody to review them.
This is on my last team when I moved us from a really bulky tool into Confluence. Literally, my manager, he was also my product owner. So he needed to review a ton of my content. He finally one day said, "I will not review any more PDFs. Get us a tool where I can collaborate, or I will not review the content." And I was like, okay, all right, that looks like permission to explore another another tool. So continuing this conversation, Chris, the next question I have is, how can we use, so if we're talking about Confluence, we're also talking about other apps in the Teamwork collection, and of course Jira comes to mind. What is like, why does it matter that we would use tools like Confluence and Jira together with the team that is building the product, like coding the product? Why is that different?
Mm, ever since I started using Confluence and Jira, it kind of became a single tool for me. And when I moved from server to cloud, it became even more obvious that integration is kind of a godsend, really. Um, I'm known as a proponent of sort of a DocOps methodology to like approach to documentation, and like on the surface, it's really simple. Documentation is a part of the product. Writers are integrated or embedded into development teams, so they participate on all the agile rituals. They deliver the updates. They participate in planning, and so they are integrated within teams as such. So this increases visibility. And in Jira and Confluence, suddenly you have that integration kind of on paper. Your documentation ticket it lives on the same board as any development ticket or QA ticket or design ticket for that particular story or an epic. So it's there, and
Yeah.
you cannot close the ticket until documentation is done. That's the ideal scenario, but just that visibility of documentation work on a team's board increases awareness of documentation as such. And that pairing Jira Confluence to me is perfect for the DocOps thing, because like you have the idea of the process, and then you can actually really put it into practice, because these two tools are so integrated that you can really treat them as two sides of the same coin. Like you have Jira to leave the breadcrumbs, and you have Confluence to document results. For example, if I put it in rather like a really condensed way. So I wouldn't really change it for anything, because sure, you can connect Jira to other tools, but if you do that, usually it's done with a connector, or you need to do it programmatically, and the integration is never that close as you have natively in an Atlassian org. And another thing which is relatively new that I really like, and it's that you don't really have to leave your environment, whether you are a writer working in Confluence, or you need to leave a comment, or you do anything in Jira. You can open Confluence page sort of directly in a Jira. You can embed it in a comment, and really most
Yeah.
recently, if you like in a situation that a subject matter expert needs to explain something to you, or clarify something in your on a Confluence page. In the past, they would really have to write a body of text to deliver the message, or you would have to meet with them. And like I worked with teams that were geographically dispersed from Texas through Europe to India, and it was extremely difficult to find a time where we would all sync.
Yeah.
So in that situation, when somebody just instead of writing a comment or having a call with you and during ungodly hours, you just can record a Loom video as a comment in a Jira ticket or in your Confluence page, and it just becomes so much easier to work. And it sounds like I'm doing a commercial for Loom and Confluence and Jira, but when it comes to if you need to iterate and if you need to iterate fast, this is so close to real time conversation as it can get, and everything is within the environment that's integrated. So you know what happened, when it happened, who said what. So there's transparency, there's accountability. Like, what's not to like? Put it this way.
It's so true. I think I'm laughing right now because somebody in the chat said that DocOps equals happy path goals, which to me I'm like, I don't know if you mean like happy path is like if everything's happy, DocOps actually works, but you know, if something goes wrong, then like we're going to ship without the documentation. And in my experience, my last team and my last gig, we also used the DocOps approach, but I had commitment from my leadership that we would not ship product without completed documentation. And the reason why is because it creates an exceptionally better user experience. So as an example, I do live streams from time to time, and I've been looking at a solution to improve our live streams, and they just shipped this whole new suite of functionality, and I was so excited, and I'm like, okay, I have some questions. I need to answer these things because I can't just throw this into production and see what happens. And guess what? They left a note in their Discord server, and they're like, hey, we will ship the documentation soon. And as a like someone who's literally like, I want to pay you for this, I'm like, well, I can do nothing now because I can't test it in production and I can't learn about the things that are crucial to me. Thus, this product, like, I don't want to say that it might as well not exist, but like, I can't do what I need to do. I need to do due diligence before I just roll this thing out. And that was why my product owners and my director said, no, we're going to do DocOps properly because otherwise we can't ship a good product experience. Our users need to be able to read about these things before they just turn them on. Chris, we got a couple of questions. One is, do you use, and let's make the answers quick because we got to keep moving. Do you use Jira to track your documentation requests, like a documentation dashboard? I'm just interested to know what that process would look like. And would you manage that within the same work that like your team, like the same Jira board where your team manages development work?
That would depend if on a couple of things. First is if it's, let's say that there's a like a general request to improve something in documentation as such. So it's not tied to any specific feature update, any deprecation. It's just like, yeah, guys, could you please clean up that section? Then I would track it as a pure documentation ticket. So it's internal to the documentation team, and deal with as I treat it as a standalone matter. If there is an overlap with whatever engineering might be working on, then yes, basically split the task or align tasks so you don't do the same job twice. This is like a practical alignment. Yes, we know it's bad, but we're going to be adding new features, so we're going to dismantle the whole section anyway. So please stay tuned. This is going to change in a couple of weeks or maybe 2 months or so. So I would treat it such a request as a standalone thing.
I think that feels right to me based on my experience. And I want to answer the other question that Emily and Sarah are both asking in the chat, which is, does this strategy, like, can we build a strategy that works for writing and exposing public documentation from Confluence? I think a lot of us are familiar with using Confluence for internal documentation. Quick answer is yes, absolutely. That's what this guide is all about, because a lot of us, including both Chris and I, have had that question in the past. We just had to crash course our way through it because this guide didn't exist. That's why we're having this conversation. Sarah and Emily, we'll talk more about this. Sarah, I love that you said specifically you you want to focus on exposing sensible content to users. We want that too. Let's move to our next question, because I think that'll get us into answering some of this. Chris, as you mentioned earlier, and both Emily and Sarah, they're used to internal documentation written in Confluence, where, like, okay, yeah, everybody does have access to Confluence, they can write and contribute, but like, that's scary especially if we're talking about like the HR guidelines, right? Or a legal guide, or a public product documentation site or something like that. So like, how do you build a healthy team-based writing process with content review in Confluence where people aren't just wrecking everything? Because that's like, the more you think about scaling that, the scarier that feels to me. So like, what do you need to consider there?
Again, if we're moving from iterations, so we have something that we can show to QA to review, then a documentation ticket would move on the board from in progress to in review or in QA, again, depending how you want to define that. And you can always manually restrict a page to a specific group or specific people. So again, it's something that, going back to governance, if you need that sort of scrutiny and there are way too many people who can contribute, not in a nice way, then you have the option to essentially lock it down to whoever you want and leave these people to do their job and then come back to you. That's perfectly fine. And again, if a more robust approach to reviewing and preventing unauthorized tampering within documentation, there are apps that can do the job really well. Apps that can really make sure that you will be compliant with whatever regulations might be thrown at you. ISO norms, SEC2, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So again, this might be more important for people who are developing internal documentation, like again, HR, legal, finance things. You don't want everybody to contribute, so it's really easy. You just select a couple of people, or maybe give access to a group. I don't know, HR contributors, and these are the only people who can actually make changes in that.
And you you gave me an example here, Chris, of like here's a work item in Jira specifically about, well, it doesn't really matter what it's about, but I think this is like so exemplary of why these two tools being connected is so valuable, and how they also help bring in control, because you can see in the linked work items area, right? This is what people who are managing their work in Jira are used to seeing, right? This is like, these are official work items here. You can also see it's also directly linked to content in Confluence. So this is what, in my experience, legitimized Confluence as our documentation tool, because my product owner would be able to look and see, here's all the pull requests related to this work, here are other work items related to this work, and here is all the documentation related to this, including because our testing team eventually started using Confluence as well. So you could also see the test plans linked here. So the work item became this sort of like a dashboard for my product owner to see where is this particular item in the process, and what all do we need to do? What is the status on all of this? And what do I, how do I jump in? And as you mentioned now, Chris, now you can pull up the Confluence page right in the Jira UI. So this is even better than what my PM was experiencing at the time, because he could just review and comment on Confluence content directly in the same space. He doesn't even need to click a link to go to another spot, which is pretty fantastic. What you also shared this example of Loom. So Loom being the other big part of the Atlassian Teamwork Collection, can you talk to me about what would my team do with Loom?
Well, as I hinted earlier, then typically in the on-location setting, I would go to a developer, we would have a meeting, I would get a walkthrough, or we would have a call online at the same, basically, thinking where is the best time to meet. I would take notes. Maybe I could record the whole conversation and then return to it. Now, I mean, they just can go in and leave a comment or do the walkthrough in triggering Loom in Confluence or Jira, embedded as a comment, and I can review it on my own good time. What's more, whatever they say, I can just grab text of it. Transcription happens automatically. And yes, other tools do that too, but this happens right in your authoring environment, right in your project management. And wherever this happens, you have access to it from the confines of your Atlassian organization. So you don't have to step out. You don't have to leave that environment. And yes, other tools do that, but where's the video stored? Is it stored locally? Is it stored at somebody else's server? How do you control that information? And again, if this can easily be a security issue, because you don't want your new features, demos being stored on a server that you cannot control. So again, there's another aspect to the whole one unified environment, one enclosed environment to it, and it's security. But yeah, that Loom situation is perfect for what we used to be a call, or used to be transcribing somebody else's talk into text. Now you have everything just there. And again, what's not to like?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I've given this example lots of times with Loom. I have worked with technicians, right? If your product includes a physical and a software side, or just even if you're working with an engineer who's like, I don't have time to write this down for you. They do have time to just talk into Loom for 2 minutes typically. And the nice thing is with Loom, especially with the Loom AI features, they don't need to even make sense. They don't have to structure the content or anything. They can just talk. And then you have that raw transcript, and you can use your AI powered tool to make sense of that, or you can just read over it and write from that. It's such a great a knowledge ingesting tool as well, which I really love. We have a couple of things from the chat here. One is somebody's using the approach of having doing their writing in a locked down work in progress space, so people can see it, comment on it. They're doing their authoring there, which is so great, right? So using page, or probably space permissions, maybe page restrictions, to keep that secure, and then moving that content out to another Confluence space that's publicly accessible. So that's a built-in Confluence feature you have. I mean, it looks just like a Confluence space, but people on the internet can see it. They can't see all your spaces, Don't panic, anybody. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a discussion, Chris, about pages and live docs. In like 30 seconds, when would you use a live doc and when would you use a page? You personally.
Well, I'm from the page only generation when there was nothing else. Um, so how should I put this? Page. I would use page when I'm working on something that will be finalized in, say, short medium term, like a documentation page, where I really this will be a closed topic once it's done, and I want to be more, let's say, in control over. I want to have more history. Like every time it's saved, it's or published or updated, it's sort of a saved, and there's a record of it. I iterate with subject matter experts on this. It kind of gives me a closure every time I save it, to use the generic term. A live document would be something where I would ideate with someone. Maybe just throw in your notes, throw in your observations there. Let's comment on this as we work. But once it's sort of a become once the content begins to take shape and form and meaning, I would turn it into a page so I can work on it. I mean, now I have our notes for this discussion open, and it's a live document, I think. Because it was a live document for a couple of weeks, and it made perfect sense to have it open so we can like quickly move stuff, change stuff, share ideas. At one point, we actually had we use this as an instant messaging. So that was perfect because we didn't have to do our instant messaging in Slack. We could just exchange ideas right there. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is not the primary use case, obviously, but we were editing it at the same time, so we just exchange whatever was on our minds. That would be my guidelines.
I think that totally is it. Yeah, for me, it's like, is this a really messy ideation thing? Then whiteboard. Is it a really messy, or just like we kind of know what we're writing and this is just part of the content creation process or whatever? Live doc. And then like, is this a page that's mostly, or is this a thing that mostly is going to be referenced? If so, page. And often things move through those three stages. So the cool thing is you can go from a Confluence whiteboard, which I've been showing through this live stream, make a messy thing. You can use Rovo to convert that content into a live doc. Do some more messy work, write that up, review it, whatever, convert it to a page. You can move things through that life cycle, kind of use them as different tools. Currently, 78% of folks on the chat prefer pages over live docs. All you control freaks. No, just kidding. No, it's probably based on what most of y'all are doing professionally.
There is one more thing that may play a role, and it's compatibility with apps. It has improved, but some apps do not like live docs because for them it's kind of like a content in limbo, and they need to have a page that's saved to process the content and to work with, to process the page as such, essentially. So that might also play a role in why people would prefer pages, or why they would prefer to have a live doc at a certain stage of the process, so the app doesn't pick it up.
Yeah.
But your mileage may vary.
Yes, and Sarah, you've been talking about version control in pages. That's why they're important. Apps enhance that even more, like K15T's app Scroll Documents adds a whole other level of versioning that we do not have time to talk about, but yeah, that's really important, and that's why you use pages and not live docs with that. Chris, we're running out of time, so let's talk about, and I see somebody wants to do a dedicated session sometime about using Confluence and Slack. That is a fantastic idea because there are so many integration points. Anyway, Chris, let's talk about release notes because those are a huge part of documentation, and you provided 2 examples of release notes. And because we're kind of low on time, can I just pull these up so you can kind of talk through like what you think is really valuable about each and how that rolls into your strategy?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So what do you want to look at? Dia or what's this? Amplify? Which should we look at first?
Let's look at Dia.
Okay. All right. Dia, the browser I'm using right now. All right. Talk to me about Dia. What's going on here? What's good?
It's extremely light. It's highly visual. I guess that if you're using the tool, you know exactly what's happening on these GIFs or GIFs or
Oof.
little videos, whatever you
Yeah.
have. And so this is extremely this has its appeal, put it this way. Again, it's not information heavy. I mean, you don't really have detailed description of the updates. But again, if it works for the target audience, then sure, it looks like it's for developers, right? It's not for end users.
For sure. I actually noticed this because I started using Dia's like weekly builds because I wanted to see like kind of what's happening with development, and I wanted a certain feature that wasn't in the main build. And I was like kind of delighted by how these look. And this is actually integrated into the product because when a new update hits, this is just a tab that's opened. And yeah, it's really cool. And like to me, I'm like, I don't even need these GIFs necessarily. I'm a GIF person, by the way. I just think it's really cool. Even like over here, you can see, look at, they've done this little, it shows me the version of the app I'm looking at and the version of well, they call it an issue, which I think is also kind of cool and magazine-y, but like, this is just a very cool, like way to discover product features right within the product because I think that's such a magical part of release notes when you can actually bring them into the product itself. Let's look at, no, not the documentation guide. Let's look at Amplify. Talk to me about Amplify, Chris. What's going on here?
So this is not as flashy. This is informative, but what I would like to talk here about is what we're seeing here and why release notes are important and how information you share is important. So this is actually something that I worked on in the past, and it's about deprecation. Something essentially is changing, features are being taken away, maybe not necessarily because of what you do with the product, but you depend maybe, as it was the case of Amplify, on APIs of social networks. So we need to prepare customers to something that's going to happen eventually, and be really, really forthcoming about the impact and mitigation steps you want to take. And this specific release note is a perfect example of collaboration within a single tool for much wider cohort of teams than you would normally have for documentation update. Because if you're announcing a change that's that big, obviously you're working with your product managers, you're working with engineering, but you also need to work with marketing, with support, with customer success managers, because they all need to go out and inform the clients that this is something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's important that everybody speaks the same language, that the messaging is the same, that you explain what's happening, that customers know where to turn to. And so somebody writes the change log, a PM translates this to business value. I create an article. Marketing takes that article to create their own messaging. So they basically distill it to something that's more palatable for general use. Marketing creates a video that explains what's happening. I can use that video in documentation.
Yep.
But we all work within the same environment with same source of truth. So that assures that you have the same messaging on every single level. Whoever you talk to in the company, the messaging is always the same. The resources they can share are always the same, and that communication strategy is extremely important. And documentation is a part of that. It's not a single part or a single source of information, but it's an important tool that you use company-wide, because everybody can just go in and tap and use that information for their specific needs.
Yeah. I think these are such great examples, and what you're talking about is sort of an information journey. I've heard some people talk about where, like, to the customer, to the user, it does not matter who wrote the thing. What matters to them is, oh my God, this API has been deprecated. We know it's not Amplify's fault, but we're using Amplify. So you need to guide me on this whole journey from every piece of content I get from Amplify. I don't care if Chris wrote it or somebody else wrote it. I need to know. By the way, there's so many people. There's so much conversation about GIF versus GIF right now. I'm see. This is why information experiences like that matter, because I'm like, well, the creator said it's GIF, but the marketing people would say GIF. So I need to align with the marketing people who understand the market. Really quick, Chris, because we're stumbling into our next slot here. There is a question that I think is really good, which is, do you have a recommendation on how early to have release documentation ready before the product launches? Sometimes their team is looped in too late, and then it becomes urgent all of a sudden. I know I have a quick suggestion for how I've done it, but how would you do it?
Again, the importance to have documentation writers to be looped in as soon as possible. That's one cure to the problem.
Yeah.
But what would help is to indicate in the ticket or a work item that pertains to a specific feature is at the very beginning. Does it need to be communicated? Does it need documentation? So does it need release notes? Does it need documentation? And if answers are yes, then get in the tech writer as soon as possible, and you begin developing your documentation and the release notes or basis for release notes as soon as possible. So that sort of mitigates the risk of being looped way too late. Of course, this can happen even in the best families or best companies. Then publish the release notes as soon as possible, or something, give something out, get something out, so whoever is surprised and opens an app next morning and it looks different, the first instinct would be go to see release notes, if anything changed. And if they don't find it one day, they will probably open a ticket with the support, but try to push it as soon as possible if you miss that.
Yeah. And my advice would be, so on my last team, because documentation was part of every development ticket, I would document each new software element that was added as it was added. And while I didn't have, kind of the more fleshed out, like, a paragraph in my release notes about what the major changes were, I did have, like, here's the bullet list of all the new elements that have been added, so people could click to go and read about those things. And then because I was writing it in Confluence, I was using K15T's app Scroll Sites, I was publishing that to our beta documentation every week, so the people on the beta track would get the software pushed to them, and they would also get the documentation pushed at the same time. So they could go and look at, the skeleton essentially of the release notes, where they could see, here's all the new elements that are currently included. Here's the new feature, and the new pages, just all the things. So I was building a skeleton of the release notes, and because I was writing it in Confluence, and because it was connected to the Jira work items, and because I could publish it with Scroll Sites, it was always up to date, because they got the code every week shipped to their instance, and they got the documentation every week shipped to the beta documentation site. Okay, there is so much more we could talk about here, and I wish we could. I'm glad you all have talked about giraffe, because there's a word that makes the English language clear as mud. But we're going to talk about something really important. Oh gosh, and we have like 2 minutes to talk about it, Chris. So really quickly, would you talk to us about turning feedback and analytics into a sustainable part of the life cycle? Because this is a part of a documentation strategy that most teams forget and some teams maybe don't like doing.
Okay, it's really important. Should more. Okay, so I'll try to say something else.
No, there it is. That's a wrap. No, just kidding.
Essentially, it kind of gels all these life cycle phases together, because maintenance is sort of an ongoing process, and you always tweak something, you always add something, you always react to some feedback. You get feedback outside of normal release cycle from your stakeholders, from customers. The question is, how do you approach that feedback? Is it just somebody screaming really loud? Does it matter? You need to evaluate that whatever feedback you're getting. Sometimes documentation gets feedback and people complain about documentation, and you realize documentation just documents something that's really, really bad in the product. And you just need documentation to explain what's happening in the product. So it's not documentation's fault. You need to take that feedback somewhere else, for example. Another funny thing is how to approach if your page is really, really popular. Is it popular because people need that documentation because they cannot work with the product without that? Or is it just so well written that people read it for pleasure? I mean, that can happen too. And in a nutshell, ensure that whatever you take from the feedback gets into the planning phase, and try to synchronize that with whatever development you have. It makes no sense to do a big revamp of a section that you wanted to do for 6 months, when in 2 months' time you will have an update that will force you to revamp that again for the sake of an update. And this is, at the end of the day, it's about managing expectations. You cannot possibly improve everything, because no matter how ideal the company is that you work for, and they have millions of writers available, it's always something that will not get done at the rate or pace that people would hope for.
Yes.
It's just this is how world works, and you need to be able to manage that. So that's probably the most difficult part of maintenance.
For sure. And Emily pointed out, also having had that experience with, often the documentation feedback is actually an issue where the product or a policy needs to be improved. This is totally true. And this is why you want to have a process where your documentation lifecycle is you're managing it in the same tools you're managing your product lifecycle, because then you can be in a planning meeting and say, hey, look at this Jira work item. This is actually, it came in as a documentation request. It's actually a product bug fix or feature improvement. So like, you don't have to be like, well, it's over here in this, but actually needs to be this. It's there, it's connected. Chris, we're out of time. I feel like you and I could talk about this much more. And you have in the documentation guide for those asking, can we write, public-facing documentation in Confluence? Yes, you can. Check out the documentation guide. We talk all about it. We ask all the questions you should consider. Yes, you can do it with vanilla Confluence. It's a little challenging, but definitely start there. We talk about some other apps we create at K15T that can aid in that, and others we recommend from the Atlassian marketplace. But check out the documentation guide. You can go to k15t.com/learn, and you can read all the things that we have thought about and we've been thinking for a while. Also, maybe hit that subscribe button. You'll subscribe to our weekly Confluence newsletter, which is fan-freaking-tastic. Actually, we're about to have a new one hit about managing images in Confluence, which is pretty fantastic. Oh, we got a shout out for the documentation guide in the chat. Chris, thank you so much for joining today.
One more thing, if I may, if you have any questions, I think comments under the YouTube video will be enabled. So feel free to ask and I'll try to answer them all.
Absolutely. You can find us anywhere where documentation and Confluence are talked about. Leave comments under this video. We will answer them. Chris, thanks for joining. Let's talk documentation again sometime, shall we?
Sure. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Y'all, thank you so much for joining the live stream. This has been really fantastic. The interaction in the chat has been so good. Whether you say GIF or GIF, we have so much other learning content for you. So maybe check out another video on our Confluence channel. Go to k15t.com/learn. Check out the documentation guide. Hit that subscribe button to get our really fantastic weekly Confluence newsletter so that you can learn how to use Confluence the best way possible. And just like, I don't know, come along with us as we continue to explore how to use Confluence to share what you do best. Bye, everybody.